record on this computer. And then, where do I have more?
Oh.
Hey, Ben.
Hey, I just want to say something. I just realized the Board of Education meeting is still going on. I have it open in another tab.
I know.
Yeah. They're going on about 4.5 hours now,
I mean, they
5
only
hours.
started at 3:30. I was like, you guys are going to work until midnight.
Yeah, it's still going on as we speak.
So listen, I've been listening to them since 3:30. So I heard at some point, I think I started to doze off. I was like, no.
Oh, I would too. Yeah. I mean, they're finally on their last component. S.E. McGuire's talking about operations and child.
I should have.
Yeah.
Okay, it's 60. All right, I'm going live. Okay. Also, if you're not talking, just go mute, and then and I'll call on you. So we'll just have an organic conversation. If there are some topics you want to bring up, nice background, Becky. All right, going live now.
Support for, again, our special education programs, so we know have that critical need. Our English language learners.
That's the Board of Education meeting.
Yeah. Preparing for streaming live. All right. Preview. All right. So folks, are you ready? Going live now. Add a title. Oh, no, add a title. Where do you have a title? Okay. Parent.
Hey, Sunil.
Hey, Dave, welcome.
Sorry for the Board of Education meeting. I know we're probably all tired of hearing it.
Chat on MCPS fall plan. All right, go live. Come on. Now what?
I just got a notification. It says live streaming on Facebook.
It is?
Yeah. Upper left-hand corner.
Is it streaming live now? Seems like it.
I got the same notification.
All right, I think we are live. All right, let me check. All right, we are live. Okay, folks. Welcome, everybody. So, Board of Education hasn't finished its marathon session. If you are like me, education nerd, then you may have been listening to them since 3:30, which I have been. And we're going to talk about the fall plan and how, and the meeting today. So I want to go around first. First of all, I want to say a little bit about, why I'm doing this, and then, turn over the mic to different folks. It's going to be an organic conversation. I don't think anybody's prepared notes, except maybe I wrote down some questions which I can ask you. Feel free to ask each other questions, as well as ask me questions, or jump in as you feel like it. If you are watching us on Facebook Live, feel free to ask questions there. And as soon as I get those questions, I will ask the folks here what they think about that. We might be joined by a couple of other people, but we will see. So I wanted to do this because, figuring out what we do in the fall is on everybody's mind. And MCPS, by the look of it, by its 44-page document, they've worked hard on it. It's not as if, they haven't tried. The question is, the plan, there's a plan, and what are the questions that the plan raises, and what we can do to make it even better. With that, I thought the two things I thought about most of all was that they were trying to replicate the traditional school day. And I can understand why they were doing it, because there's a demand from parents to have to go back to normal. And if normal is not going to be inside of a school building, then for sure we'll have the darn normal at home, right? And so we have 6 hours and 15 minutes of time broken down pretty much into the traditional fashion. And so that's something I think we ought to talk about. The second thing that I was really struck by is by the amount of screen time, right? And I don't want to sort of be the person that says, we should have no screen time. But today it's an emergency situation, so we have to have some amount. But how much screen time? What that means for playing Minecraft afterward? If we are going to spend 6 hours and 15 minutes on a screen every day, then I don't think we're going to play Minecraft, or at least I hope they're not playing Minecraft after. So, so those are the things that really, really struck me. Also, the fact that the grading, they're still working on it, and that seems to be the shortest, maybe perhaps at this stage the most weakest section. But we should talk about that. All right. So with that, Dave, since you came in last, do you want to go first? What do you think are the highlights? Where do you think, what do you think about it, and how do you want to go forward?
Well, aside from the scheduling and that, which obviously those are all big concerns, the thing that struck me at the outset was when Smith said that we might be looking at going back earlier than we originally thought, and that he asked for more specific guidance from the state. He wants more metrics, I guess, from the states, very specific numbers. And I don't think any local official does that ask without knowing that there's something else going on at the state level. I don't think he goes out on a limb like that, unless he's just trying to pass the buck because of the heat that Dr. Gales got. But that struck me as rather odd or interesting, I guess. The possibility that we would go back before what was originally planned, and we're going to take another look at this somehow. So that was that. On the scheduling, I'm an elementary school teacher. I think Jeanette Dixon made a very good point that nobody's done this virtually. And for anyone in that meeting to say that they know how much time teachers need to do the work was pretty presumptuous. I've been a part of this planning the whole summer on the health and safety end of it. Their contention that teachers have been very involved, I believe, who said that? DUCA said that.
Right.
Yeah, we've been involved, but are they listening? To just throw out numbers there and say that so many teachers, 300 teachers have been involved in this. Well, yeah, kind of. A lot of things were presented to us. I'm sorry?
There were a total of 350 people involved in the planning, and of them, 100 were teachers. That's
100 of the 300. So yeah, still the number. I mean, my point is that there's being a participant and there's being someone who's making a difference. And we did have some influence on some things, but the idea that they've listened to us on the important stuff, like planning time, like how you do a breakout room, like having adequate staffing, like having adequate training. They kept going on and on about training. Well, I'm sorry, but virtually all of the training we're doing is the required training that we normally do, and then a little bit of training on the new Synergy, and a little bit on the new curricula. but there's been no like training on how we actually do this unless we volunteered to do it. A lot of the training that's happening is teachers are just volunteering their time and going into PDO and taking the classes.
So let me get this right. So Dr. Smith said that it was almost 85,000 hours of PD teachers are supposed to have taken.
Mm-hmm.
So are you saying, I mean, have they done that?
Well, I don't know which hours he's talking about there. They kept throwing that number out, but I don't know if that's just the synergy training and the Eureka training and the benchmark training, if that's the required training that we have every year, the compliance training. I don't know what those numbers mean. But what I can tell you is a lot of teachers are going on and doing training on their own, just choosing to do it, volunteer, not paid. And it's really, frankly, making a lot of teachers quite perturbed that the county, MCPS seems to be trying to make the case that there's all this training going on that they've done mandated and that it's there for the staff is ready. But in reality, we're doing it because we can do it. And I'm a empty nester. I have the time, but if I had little kids at home, I can't be doing this voluntary training. So they're selling this to the public as something that it is not, as far as the training goes.
Becky, how do you feel about this?
Hi, thank you for having me today. So I am a first grade teacher in the county, and I also have my own rising third grader and rising fifth grader, also at a different school in the county. And I would say that there is certainly benefit to face-to-face time on the computer. That is how young children are going to learn with their teacher. However, we do need to strike a balance between an appropriate amount of time that keeps them engaged in learning and an appropriate amount of time with a break and maybe come back. And I've had the benefit of doing that during summer school this summer, and we have found that we are able to keep them engaged for a few hours at a time, and then a break, and then come back together for an hour. And then we actually end our day because it's a half day for summer school, it works beautifully. The kids stay engaged most of the time. We do a lot of movement and brain breaks. I'm a little uncertain how that will feel for the children and the teachers in a 9 to 3 type of schedule. So I do think it's important to bring them live and to do this all together. And I'm thinking of my own children as well, who are upper elementary ages. They need to learn with their teachers on Zoom or in breakout rooms in Zoom, and then have some downtime and then re-engage after a break. But not not several hours with a break just in the middle of the day. I think that speaking for my own children at home, but also many of my first graders, it's hard to keep them engaged and wanting to be engaged with the class the entire time.
So looking at the sample schedule that was in the plan, I think they have maybe 15 minutes, 20 minutes between these blocks of time when they are off screen. Does that work for you, or is that?
So 15 to 20 minutes, I think that would be reasonable with a planned break with the teacher. But remember that young children are going to need support getting in and out of Zoom. So there needs to be people who can help with them with that. So if it's just a limited break like that, that may be very challenging for parents or older siblings to help them get in and out. And on that same note, having different schedules each day is another challenge. So one of the benefits to this summer is the students log in with me twice a day at the exact same times, Monday through Friday. So there's no tomorrow log in at this time and the next day you're going to stay longer. That is a challenge as a parent, and even as a teacher, I can say that I probably wouldn't have as many children logging in each day if the schedule fluctuates each day.
what do you think about students, like especially young students, logging in in the morning, then just stopping the video and not, instead of logging out, just stopping the video, going for their 15-minute break and then coming back? Do you think, I mean, I thought the Board of Education did that when they took their break, right? They didn't stop. I think they just took stopped the video.
And I can see that definitely working for adults and probably older children who can probably keep track of time. Little ones, I know that there are tactics. You can, turn on a song and tell them when you hear the song, stop, come back. But I think some of those shorter breaks might be guided better with the adult on screen with them. So we're gonna finish this part, we're gonna finish our phonics, and then we're gonna do a brain break, and then we're gonna move into reading a text together. But I think when we're asking them to log out, it should be for a time that they can actually have downtime, maybe have lunch, not just lunch though, like maybe go outside and play for a little bit. I actually had my own children do that this summer between some of their summer classes. I was like, okay, now go ride your bike. I'll call you back in when it's time. But that works because I'm here. It is going to be challenging while I'm teaching and managing that as well, especially if your breaks don't line up with my breaks.
Yeah, we haven't even talked about that. Hold on a minute. Fred, you have a first grader.
Yeah, I've got a first grader, I've got a sixth grader, and an eighth grader. And I think, Dave, what you said, I think you're saying what Dixon was saying about we haven't done this before. And I think we all need a little humility here, right? That both humility and some flexibility to be able to, you guys who are teachers, right? After the first week, you'll know a lot more than we know today about how this stuff works. And I would love, what you know after that first week or that second week to be put in the mix so we do this better, right? To think that we're going to do this great from the gate, yeah, I hope we do. But the reality is learning from what you guys are experiencing and what our children are experiencing day to day for a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, that can only improve, right? And I think having the humility to understand, yeah, we haven't done this before, we're doing our best, we're getting the real input from people, and we want to continue to build a feedback loop from those folks on the front lines, from particularly teachers, but also parents, what they're experiencing, so we can make the tweaks necessary to make this as good as possible.
Thanks, Fred. I want to, so we are on Facebook Live, and Ryan Tinsley sort of asked the question, should kids sit, which we're absolutely talking about right now, should kids sit in front of a computer for 7 hours a day? That's a real question, and I think you answered some of that. Teachers, also, he said teachers don't have technology and resources to effectively teach. It says my wife uses a county Chromebook to teach, and I don't think it's working that well. Ben, go ahead.
So I'll cover 2 points here. So first of all, I'm Ben O'Hara. I am a school counselor at the secondary level. I have experience at middle and high school. I was also a former elementary school paraeducator, so I have elementary school experience from the paraeducator experience. So first part, should students be in front of a computer for 7 hours a day? It's not exactly 7 hours a day. It is still a long time, but it's not 7 hours a day. You still will have lunch, and there are still breaks. Like we mentioned, I can't, right off the top of my head, I can't tell you how long the breaks are in between each class. For the secondary level, you only have 4 classes a day because they're doing even and odd days. So they're doing 1, 3, 5, 7 on the one day, 2, 4, 6, 8 on the second day. And then on Wednesdays, which I hope we get to discuss, is this school day for secondary, at least, where you don't actually go to class. It's a day of self-study and office hours, if you will, in the morning. And then you have 20 minutes in each period in the afternoon. Again, this is I'm talking middle and high school secondary. So I agree with you that maybe it's still too much of a time, but don't think of it as 7 hours straight of being in front of a screen, because that's not quite true.
Right, and I think one of the speakers at today's meeting said that the time is closer to maybe 3 hours on screen in total, but maybe I misheard. It was a long meeting.
Yeah, for secondary it would be 4 hours, because each of your 4 classes is scheduled to be an hour as of right now.
Okay.
Elementary, I'm not sure. Someone else can take that if they want to.
Sarah, can I ask you? You're at Arcola, right?
Yes.
And so they have the they've already started.
Mm-hmm.
And what's been the experience of the last month?
You know, it's definitely working better than it was in the spring, but there are challenges, and there are challenges for the families dealing with COVID and the impact on the economy and their impact on their jobs and the impact on providing food for families. And it's a struggle to get all the kids connected at the right time. And then even if you have all the kids connected, all the students completing their assignments and being able to verify that the students are actually learning the material. So it's not just that they're present in front of the computer, but you know, that it doesn't work as well to have students annotating a page, but then if they're writing in a workbook, how does the teacher check that work? You know, so how do you truly verify that they're learning as much as they should be learning?
If I remember correctly, they talked about they're working with MAP to expand assessment so that you're able to do more with it. That's what they said at the meeting. I'm not sure what that means, but that's one of the things they said, that they are using more diagnostic tools and other things to be able to get at that. You haven't seen anything?
I mean, we don't have specifics on how that would work or what that might look like.
Yeah.
If you administer a test, say, once every 2 months, once every 4 months, however often it is, 3 times a year, that gives you a number. But I think what teachers want, and I hope that parents want for their kids as well, is when you say, I explained how to multiply decimals. You want to know that the kid understood how to multiply decimals and got the answer right on the PDF or on the paper, and how do you verify that? In theory, you click and turn it in, but for a lot of kids, oh, I have to click save here, I have to click turn in there, I have to upload, I have to attach. Oh, wait a minute, I was doing it the old-fashioned way. I've got the workbook right here. I'm going to hold it up for my teacher to look at. You know, how do you know?
Yeah, this is going to be an issue. We have a question from Kate Woods on Facebook Live. And so the question is about training. Is it a plan to provide extra training resources? And then the addition to that is online teaching requires teachers to be always on. They don't have time to prep, or do lesson planning. And it's not sustainable with tag team teachers of co-teaching. So has anybody had any, we have 4 teachers here, 5, but I'll take myself out. Jody, you want to address a little bit of that? What about, are you getting some training or what is the situation there?
I haven't had any training yet that's been given to me. I have been one of those Google Classroom people who've been avoiding Canvas for a really long time, and now I need to baptize myself by fire and get that going. And I was actually talking to some friends today about just how by this time in the school, in the summertime, we're kind of like, okay, this is winding down. Now we're going to we're going to go back and start thinking about school again. And really, this is when our brains start to kind of get back engaged into fall.
Right.
And my colleague and I'm 19 years, she's 18 years into the county, and both of us were just kind of feeling like we're just floating here. I'm not exactly sure where to start because everything is important, and I don't really know what I don't know. and she and I are both ESOL teachers and had a really hard struggle this spring engaging with kids live online. So we don't even really know what this looks like because to be honest, we didn't really have any good experience with it in the spring. Right. For various reasons with the age group that we teach. So, I would love a magic wand right now to get everything in, so that I'm ready, because it's just weeks away now, and usually now I'm just we know what we do when we're at physical school, but this seems just so amorphous to us that I don't even know where to begin.
Right. Yeah. Ben, have you had any training, or counselors have had any training?
So similar to like what the training has been talked about before, we've had training to like learn I don't think I'm the best person to answer this just because I don't teach a class, and most of my stuff is one-on-one with students virtually. So, I can say that yes, there's been like the trainings that people have mentioned with regards to the new platforms and learning how to use the platforms. But because I'm not a teacher, I can't really speak to like, has there been training on how to co-teach or how to like best deliver instruction or anything like that?
Well, yes, but how do you, okay, so let me ask you the different question, which is, so in terms of, you have to coordinate with teachers, right? And so sometimes you're going to have to come into the classroom coordinated with teachers. Are you finding that possible? Is that something that you're thinking about? So you come in and the teacher takes 10 minutes to get off, and you do the 10 minutes and you do some presentation, and then you say, okay, handing you back. Is that something that is? Are you thinking about it, or is the counseling folks thinking about that? I would imagine that would be something.
I'm not at that point yet, but I'm sure that is something that a lot of counselors are thinking about and wondering how they're going to plug in and do their character education lessons. But me specifically, I've had so much other stuff to think about that I'm not quite at that point yet.
That's the term they use, plug in. Thank you very much.
Yes.
How about this idea that you have to be on all the time? What do teachers think about having to sort of be like ready, and is that how much of a strain or stress is that? Or is it not? Can you get used to it? To be on? No? Because this is something that Kate asked on Facebook. So, and I also want to correct her question. She said that it's not possible to do without tag team. So she thinks only co-teaching will give you that kind of sort of flexibility. So you have to have a co-teacher with you all the time so you can switch on and off. Right?
It is useful to have another teacher with you at the same time, but I think when you talk about it for the students and for the teachers, the idea that we could be ready to be called on at any time, perhaps, yes, in a classroom, you should be ready and prepared to answer questions at any time, but it's a little harder to transfer that when you're sitting at home knowing that any minute your computer will go ding, and at that point you have to react and respond. And so it's a challenge. And then for your kids, do you want your kids to be sitting by the computer with 10-minute breaks? You know, when you think about it, okay, but what aren't you doing? If it's part of the school day, you have recess, you have PE, you know, yes, you have online PE, but it doesn't transfer the same way. You know, there's no way to build in recess where you have time to run around and play with your friends. But even if you have time to, you know, jump in your own household or chase your own cat, just being able to step away from a screen and not be constantly sitting in one spot. You know, some people don't have that consciousness. Oh, I have my 10-minute break now. I need to stand up and walk up and down my own steps so that I get that physical movement in.
So Sarah, can I ask, this is I think very, very important. Would you encourage your students to stand up at the and sort of move, even if, or eat, or, you know, or do you think they need to be completely 100% focused on the screen itself? I mean, and I'm especially asking for elementary kids, right? Older kids, perhaps, you know, there's a different situation. But for elementary kids, is it the, I mean, would you be how would you feel about that, Becky, Sarah, Dave? I mean, you all are, you know, doing elementary school.
You know, it's hard because if a kid is eating breakfast, you want the student to have food and eat their breakfast. But if you're trying to teach a lesson, you have to say, you know, put the cinnamon roll down or put whatever it is down and put your hands on the computer and type your answer, because we only have a half an hour for this class and this is what needs to happen right now. Right. But of course the kid wants their yogurt, you know? So it's a battle. And there are brothers and sisters and siblings. I mean, I've met all sorts of baby sisters and they're lovely, but you know, you can't tell a child, don't hug your little brother right now. That's impossible. It's hard.
Right. Well, Becky, Dave, anybody wants to take that?
Yes, I completely agree with Sarah. So in summer school, now that we're live much longer than the spring, and there are actually many benefits to this. The instruction is much more consistent and much stronger than I think it was in the spring. But again, it's a half day, it's not an entire day. So because they are live longer, we build in those breaks. They are, at least for my co-teacher and I, and by the way, when I say co-teacher, we come together for games and brain breaks, but we break out for the academic portions, which we have a schedule that we follow. So we break out for about 40 minutes and then we come together for 10, we break out and like play a game, like a scavenger hunt, Simon says, then we break out for 40 for literacy or 50, then we come back. But if we break out for 50, we'll in our own breakout still do a brain break at some point during that time, because we do want the kids to move, and we actually do want them to eat when they're live that long. They do need to have a snack. Obviously, we would like it to be a healthy snack and not something sticky, and not during phonics, because I need to see them making those sounds. But generally, I'm fine with them having, you know, a snack to the side or a drink, and which I know that in the spring was kind of a no-no for many teachers and many classes. But the live time was so much more limited in the spring. So to answer the question, I do like guiding those breaks so that we make sure they take them, because we need them to be focused and engaged during the academic portions. So that kind of goes back to what I said earlier, that I think those brain breaks need to be planned and at specific intervals and guided, but then there needs to be longer breaks off of the screen completely.
Okay. Go ahead, Dave.
So Sunil, in the spring, I teach fourth grade, but my colleagues were paired up. They were departmentalized. So I was a solo teacher. I had nobody in the room with me ever. Occasionally the ESOL teacher would pop in. So in the brick and mortar, you know, kids are moving all the time. You have like rotations. So the kids are they're in math, they're doing a game, or they're working a worksheet or on the Chrome or whatever. And I would love to have been able to replicate that by having breakout rooms. But I didn't have anybody to monitor the kids in the breakout rooms. And I'm hearing from the summer school teachers that you were kind of advised to just kind of pop in and out. I don't know if that's true of everybody. I've heard that from some of the summer school teachers. And that question was asked repeatedly today.
Correct.
You know, how do you do breakout rooms? Where are the people? And it was never answered. You know, they're going to give us guidance. Well, you know, what are we waiting for? It's August. You know, we'd like to know how we can plan this. If I don't have another adult in the room, then are they just going to, what I think they were saying was, we're going to try and, you know, stress to the children that they should behave themselves when they're in the breakout room, even if an adult isn't there, and I can pop in at any time. Well, that's not real world. That's not going to work. I mean, kids are kids. They're going to play. They're going to talk about, you know, Nintendo, whatever. They're going to talk about whatever. So unless we get an answer to that question, which is like, for my way of looking at things, and as a fourth grade teacher, that's a huge question. And then I've been trying all week to get an answer, and working with the PTA, the MCC PTA. Can parent volunteers monitor the rooms? Well, as we stand right now, no. MCPS is saying no, that you can't have parent volunteers be just someone there to be there. Yet we let them take kids out into the hall all the time, or take them off into the corner of the room. I'm not saying just anybody, but, you know, some vetted, somebody who's gone through the training, someone you'd allow on an overnight field trip. They should be able to just be in the room. That would make so much easier. And the PTAs are so eager to do it. You know, people, and not just the PTAs. I had my former principal reach out to me on Facebook, who lives in Florida, saying, I would be happy to help you, but I'm not allowed. So I don't see how that's going to work. And that means we'll have kids sitting for long periods of time, unless we break the whole class. And then that cuts into curriculum, that cuts into a teaching time. So there's just a lot of very specific questions that people in the classroom have that I don't think the people making the plans understand.
Well, so I want to ask you, so let me actually ask you two questions stemming from what Becky just said and what David just said. So I want to understand why, so with 100 teachers involved, why do you think there has not been the sort of the input that you've been looking? That's for you, Dave. And Becky, I want to ask you a different question, which you, and you said it this, you know, I've heard this from others, but you said it 2 times now, that summer has been better than spring. All right, so maybe you can sort of identify 1 or 2 reasons, or even maybe 3 reasons for why you think summer has been better. So Dave, go first, because it'll give Becky a little time to think.
I just think there's a difference between saying you're involved and being listened to. I will say that I was mostly in the health and safety stuff.
Yeah.
That the mid-level people from central office were much more receptive to our input. But there were a lot of things that came back when we first started, and by the way, we had to fight to get on these things. They were not given to us. MCEA had to fight to get representation.
Right.
When we arrived, they had already started planning, and they already had like a template laid out. So then it was a question of, well, what do we do with that template? And like I say, some things were accepted, but there's a lot of things that are just being driven from central, partly because they're there all the time. You know, they can interact with each other all the time virtually, and we're not a part of that. So I think that's where the breakdown was.
Okay. Becky?
Hi. So yes, I do think summer has been so much more effective than spring. I think part of that is because we've learned from what did and not, what worked and what didn't work in the spring. And some of the things that we found we needed were, we need to be able to see the kids. And I realize that there has to be privacy for homes, but there's a lot of times that I ask the kid, and this is something we learned from the spring that we now encourage a lot more in the summer. I'll ask them to not raise their virtual hand, but raise their actual hand. Or I'll say, oh, the equation on the screen says 7 minus 2. Show me on your fingers how many should be left. So I need their screen on so I can see that every child is showing me that answer. Or like I've mentioned already, phonics. I need to see that they're sounding out the words with me for reading and writing. And then another reason it's been better, which I kind of already touched on, is because it is longer FaceTime. We have an opportunity to do literacy every day, and we have an opportunity to do math every day, and we actually have an opportunity in summer school to do extra enrichment each day as well.
Right.
But I keep going back to the fact that it's the right amount of time to be live, because it's enough that they get really, they were actually able to build relationships. I didn't know any of these kids. That was a fear of mine, that I'm getting new in the spring. I knew my kids because I had them all school year, but then now here I am. I don't know any of these kids. What am I going to be able to build relationships? And absolutely you can, especially if they keep their screens on. I know most of my students now by face and by voice. And so again, I keep going back to the fact that we do need to be live for a portion of the day. I just don't want it to become so screen heavy that they really do disengage, and it's no longer beneficial for kids or teachers. So, but I would say the benefits to the summer have been, we have literacy, we have enough time for each thing each day to really do it well. And also, I feel like in the spring they were expected to watch a lot of videos ahead of time and do a lot of work ahead of time, and then come to the Zoom meeting with all of that already solid, and then we were supposed to extend on that, and that may have been realistic for some children, but I wouldn't say that was probably realistic for the majority of children. And now, because we have time every day for literacy and math and extra fun stuff and community circles and games, because we have time for all of those things, we are able to build relationships and actually teach them. So I do think they're learning more now than they maybe did in the spring.
Right. Well, thank you. That's good to know. Fred?
Yeah, so I had a question, right? So
yeah, go ahead.
I'm not just a parent, I'm also president of PTA, middle school PTA.
Oh.
The teachers, like, what are some things, right? None of us have ever faced this, what we're facing now before. I know a lot of PTA leaders are struggling with, well, what do we do, right? How do we really help teachers and help, the school in this moment in time? It's not like, we know how to do live events. Well, that's not happening, right? We know how to, the bake sale at the spring concert, the fall concert, right? So what are the things, if you all could decide or help guide, right, that would be really helpful? I mean, there's some things, right, that we'd love to do, like even help out, volunteering in breakout rooms that apparently we can't do right now, but are there other things that, particular to this time in supporting you guys, that would be very helpful for PTA leaders to do?
Ben?
Yeah. So one of the biggest things is like the lack of knowledge of how to use stuff amongst parents and families. Lack is not the right word. The gap. Some parents and families are very comfortable with computers, very comfortable with Zoom, the internet, etc. A lot of families are not, however. So if PTAs or parents could set up something to help their families within their own school learn how to use the Chromebook and learn how to like log into things and passwords and usernames, and this is how you get to this site and this is how you get to that site, that would be really, really helpful.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm sure other people have other suggestions, so I'll stop. But, yeah.
Jody?
Just along those lines, I think, I think that the amount of messaging that needs to get out to families, and I think all families, not just ones that are living in certain socioeconomic circumstances or are, or have to work outside the house, as opposed to being able to work at home. But I think the amount of outreach that needs to be done, I think, is a lot more than what anyone can imagine. And having teachers be responsible for making those phone calls home eats up an enormous amount of time. And I mean, from my experience, I had lists and lists of kids to call you know, weekly or even more than, you know, once a week, to try and remind them to like come to Zoom or do your work. You know, I had a, you know, a group of seniors I was literally dragging by the hair to get over the finish line, but that's another story. But it required a lot of my time making those phone calls with the language line. And I would just sit with one translator and just go down my list of 12, 15, 20 kids. But it takes, you know, especially when you're doing translation, it takes double the amount of time.
Were you able to find translators easily?
Most of my kids speak Spanish, so our language line service is amazing. I've used it in the past for other languages besides Spanish, but given that that's, you know, our largest non-English language group, I would imagine in Montgomery County, at least you know, for my school, you know, it was you know, obviously easy to get somebody on the line, and it's a great service, but man, does it take a lot of time. And if we could get help with that, because, you know, just like we were saying before, like, we don't really know how this is all going to play out. You know, given our experiences in the spring, I'm glad that Becky says that it's a lot better in the summer. So fingers crossed that maybe this will keep going. But I mean, we need to get that word out to those families that this is how school's going to be for a while, and this is how learning is going to happen. And your kid needs to be, you know, you know, we can argue how many hours that's going to be in front of a computer screen, but school is happening, and I think we just need all the families to understand that, and the kids too. I mean, from high school perspective, I mean, these kids, you know, oh, I'm at home, I'm gonna just sleep until 1 o'clock in the afternoon. It's like, no, guys, you need to wake up and come to class, you know. And so I you know, and this is across the board of just teenagers, and I think the outreach, if we can get more help with that, because, you know, teachers are going to be stressing about how to engage kids online and plan online and build modules on Canvas, and that's going to take an enormous amount of time on our end. If we also have to then call everybody, I don't know when I'm going to sleep.
Yeah, no, and we need you to sleep. I just want to let you know that this morning, my son woke up and went on Zoom literally within 30 seconds. Because he's taking health, so he woke up and went on Zoom. That's the first thing he did. I think life is going to be really different. Yeah, so that, I think, is a big takeaway. That, you know, this is going to be what education looks like. So it's interesting that Dr. Smith said that, you know, he has become much better at Zoom and WebEx and GoToMeeting today. And I thought that was an interesting observation. Like, we are all better, you know, at that. But some of us are, you know, moving faster than others. And so I suspect that, you know, sort of getting everybody to join the caravan is, I think, a big issue. A couple of things that I want to address from Facebook questions. And then, Jody, I really want to go back to a follow-up with you on what, you know, how many students you have, and, you know, this thing about having to call and stay in touch, and what some solutions might look like. Okay, so you have a minute, but I just want to get at a couple of questions. One is a question from Joanna Silver, and Joanna's asking about you know, cameras and privacy. So I didn't hear very much today. Did anybody else hear anything about cameras and privacy today? Ben?
So this is an issue. So they briefly talked about it, and they briefly mentioned having a universal MCPS background.
Oh yeah, I heard of that.
So basically every student and every staff member would have the background. It would be like set up on their account. They wouldn't have to set it up themselves. And that would solve the issue of, like, the privacy, if you will.
But the privacy also has to do with the student. I mean, the student. Right. So, for example, right, my son wants most of the time to hear, and he wants his video off.
Right. So they didn't address the actual having the camera on or off. They just addressed the background part.
Right. Fred, you were going to say?
The same thing that Ben said. I think they just really addressed the background part and not. But to what other folks were saying, I know our elementary schools in our area have already done, the PTAs already done one training on my MCPS to help parents learn how to log in. And I think, trainings on Zoom and other stuff are things that I think we have the community resources to do. So I think that'd be really, really something concrete that folks can do in this period.
Okay. So there's a question from Julie Tate Walkup, and she's asking about can families with young children combine what MCPS is offering virtually with homeschooling? I thought specifically they said no, right? Did anybody hear something? I thought Rebecca Smandrowski asked about this, about what would happen if there was homeschooling, and Dr. Smith said something about there being state guidance. And
I think that you have to get a little more context on what she actually means by homeschooling. Does she mean that she's going, because they are establishing some way to track attendance, so there will be an attendance recording method somehow, some way,
right?
So if she's saying can I just decide when my kid shows up and stays enrolled? Yeah, I just think there needs to be a little more context to that question on what she actually means by that.
Well, I think what she means is that they do whatever they pick and choose from what they want from MCPS, they take from MCPS, and then what they want to do on their own, they will do on their own. Sort of an a la carte model rather than being stuck in front of a computer for. So I think that's the issue. From 9 to 3:15, you are there, right? And you may get breaks or whatever, but you are there. And so I think the question that's going to come up rightfully is, well, do I have to be there from 9 to 3:15? Why can't I be there from 9 to 11 and then from 4 to 6 or whatever? Some variation, because people will have infinite variations on this, right? So I think that, so there will be people that say, oh, I'll take this part of MCPS, but then why can't I do a homeschool? Why can't I do it off time?
I think that's really hard because you have to look at who that works for. If you say, of course, parents have to make decisions about what's best for their kids. But if you say, I only want my kid to be online during these hours, well, the reading class is in the afternoon. So is your kid not going to learn to read? And is that okay to say if you're an upper income parent who says, I have the education to make sure that my kid is learning what they need to learn, but then could we say that a parent who has to bring the kid along with her while she's cleaning houses, because that's what she does for a living, and she says, oh, well, my older child is tutoring him while I'm cleaning. Would we count that as homeschooling, or would we have another way to make sure that the child is actually learning? So how do you determine if the students really are learning or if they're just disengaged and not getting everything that they need?
Yeah, I think that's a concern that with sort of state standards. Dave?
Yeah, I think to follow up on that, the whole idea of assessing, if so you are a parent and your kid kind of grasps the concept fairly early on and just ditches the rest of the morning. But in the course of that morning, you've given a little assessment. And so do we let the kid then take the assessment later? Because that's kind of what Smith was saying, that we somehow record these. That was unclear to me too. Recording what? What are we recording? Are we just recording ourselves? We're recording the whole session, and then a parent can go in at 9 o'clock at night with their kid and listen to it. That was never said to us. That's the first I've heard that we were going to be recording ourselves. So there's that issue. And overall about assessment, how do we know who's doing what? How do we know? How many of you have had student projects come in that look really amazing? and you grade it because you gotta, but how often would that happen? And that's a whole issue of equity as well, right there. Like how many parents are able to help their children in this language to do well on whatever it is they're doing? And how do we know who did it? Well, we don't. So that, I mean, that's where I get back to grading. I know we're going to have grades, but from the very beginning when we started this, that really troubled me because I have a range of students and a range of families in my classrooms every year. And some kids will do it without their parents, even though they are, you know, new to the country, they'll just be dogged about it. And some kids will not, and they won't have anybody there to support them. So then we're grading privilege. I mean, we are.
Yeah, we agree. Well, the entire grading system, in some ways, we are grading privilege. So, you know, this is something that we have to look at. But the grading system is problematic in many ways. I'm not saying to get rid of it, but we have to recognize that your point, which is grading is often about privilege. Jody, okay, so now I want to go back and ask you how many students do you have? What percentage of them were you calling every week, or what was the sort of caseload like every week? And what do you think is a solution to that?
Man, well, this spring I think I had about 60 in total 12th grade ESOL students. And they were in various states of disengagement or engagement before the pandemic. So they were already struggling with adult problems, a lot of them, because, you know, I mean, they're seniors anyway, but some of them have been, you know, having to do adult things like work and take care of younger siblings or take care of their own children, in addition to trying to get graduated and getting their credit. So this was kind of an issue to begin with, in terms of their attendance in school, in physical school. When we went virtual, I mean, between me and
Jody, you're cutting. Is Jody's audio cutting out?
Oh, is it? Uh-oh.
It's better.
Oh, it's better? Okay, I don't know what I just did. I moved a little bit. Okay, sorry. So they were in various states of engagement and disengagement already when we went virtual. Between me and we had a rock star of a dedicated counselor to our upper level ESOL students. So between her work, my work, and our assistant principal, we were calling some kids, either calling, you know, actual phone calls or texting. Texting sometimes worked a lot better, especially with kids, because again, texting. So we would use like Remind, you know, not our personal phones, but we would have a Remind number and that sort of thing, to try and engage them, some of them almost daily. But I would say that I would probably tried to reach them and or their parents, you know, all of them at least once a week. But some of them, I would say maybe there were a good solid 10 to 15 kids that I would try and text every other day or so, to make sure that they were getting the work done, because this was crunch time for them too. And I don't, you know, that I think they just saw it as I'm removed from school and I don't have to do anything anymore, and which was obviously not the case. And so it's like, no, we need you to graduate. Like, we need you to graduate. You need to graduate. Like, you know. And it was like you remove the classroom and the school from them totally, and it's like it's just out of sight, out of mind.
Right. And what do you think? Should we have like paras or paraeducators and others do the calling, or does it have? I mean, what kind of help do you need?
You know, paras would be great too if they can, if that can be part of their of their duty. But I mean, they're usually plugged into classrooms, you know, and especially now as helping out with the breakout rooms and that sort of thing already. So I don't know how much constraint they're going to have on being able to make as many phone calls as we're probably going to have to make, especially. I mean, I'm going to speak for ESOL, especially, you know, we just were making constant phone calls to try and get them back in. And this was level 1 all the way to, kids who've been here 4 or 5 years. And so it's going to be a gigantic undertaking for counselors, paras, parent volunteers, anyone who has a free moment. So I think that's the problem. We don't really have a lot of free moments. None of us really do.
Right. And I think parents can really step forward if MCPS, I think maybe the credentials to get on Zooms is a problem for parents, but I think parents can call. I think that if calling is the issue, then you can have I know in high school it's hard to imagine, but like a classroom parent, right? Who can do some of that, and there's a model that exists. Do you think that have you ever worked with parents like that? No,
and I mean, because it's just never, it's never been this huge of a problem where we're having literal blocks of children not engaging in school, because it's like we can account, we know where they are if they're not in school in the physical building, and they come back. It's not like they're just disappearing. But when we went virtual in March, it was, kids were just kind of falling off and not really returning, or just randomly turning in an assignment, and that's all you hear from them. You don't even see them on a video screen or anything. So it was bizarre to say the least. But
I can second all of that. I had very similar experiences with the calling and you had all A's, now you have all E's. I mean, like, there was just drastic drop in grades when we went virtual. There's drastic drop in like attendance, and yes, the calling was a good chunk of my day too.
So I don't know if you know, I got dragged into online teaching about 7 or 8 years ago. And I didn't want to do it. I really did not want to do it. But, but my students needed those classes. They didn't have, they couldn't. And it was, the first thing I realized was, and we had training, right, before we did at the conversion. So in converting a face-to-face class to online, I realized that it was not a conversion. It was basically creating an entirely new course that was completely different from what the face-to-face course was. And then it took me like maybe 1 or 2 times of teaching it to really figure out what the heck I was doing. I had to change the materials. One of the first things I realized, and this is college, so don't to take it with a grain of salt, but one of the first thing I realized is when I did videos for the students, they would watch the video but never go and do the reading. That would almost never happen. They would think about the videos as having replaced the reading. And to me, so one of the big lessons was in teaching this was I had to get rid of videos. So everybody wants, to learn by video, and I think that's a great idea. But my lesson from this was completely the opposite, that if I did not give any videos, provide videos, then then students would actually read better, which is kind of, counterintuitive. And that's what, so to me, teaching online just changed the entire, when I teach online, it's completely different. When I teach online, for example, 80% of my preparatory work is done before the semester starts. 80%. And during the semester, all I'm doing is troubleshooting and hand-holding, which is exactly what Jody's experience was like. You just get to call them. Did you take the test? Did you do this? And did you do that? And so, but the actual material, putting together the materials, the tests, the assessments, all of it, right, is I have to do before. And so, to me, that kind of demand from online teaching just demanded whole rethinking so many things, right? One is we have to rethink the school building. So they said something about, if a student, an MCPS student, goes to 2 schools, now they will be able to do attendance at both schools. And this is important for some high school kids, right? That's sort of opening up the school building. Can we do that for staff? So there are some, I think, lots of opportunities here. Why does the same lesson have to be delivered by 30 teachers to 200, 300, 400, 500 students? Why can't one of those 30 make one lesson and then another make the other lesson? But that requires a kind of coordination that I don't think is in place. I don't think the mechanisms for that kind of coordination are in place. So, I mean, you guys, the teachers have done an incredible job. I can't, being thrown into this in the deep end of it, and coming out as you've done, and looking at the, how much better the summer has been over spring. It's quite fantastic. Sarah, you said something to me earlier as we were starting about attendance, right? And how they were going to take attendance. So do you want to talk about that a little bit?
I mean, this goes back to what Jody said about high school students being engaged. If they're not there, then what? At the same time, when you're looking at younger students, elementary school or middle school students, if they're on Zoom, but they turn their screens off and you can't tell if they're actually with you and moving and talking and paying attention, or if they've walked out of the room and they're doing something else, technically speaking, you've checked a box that they were there, but what's most important is we need to make sure the kids are learning.
As far as I understand, they will be able to mark themselves present by going into My MCPS. There's some mechanism apparently in there. They could either attend a live session, participate in it, or mark themselves present by doing some work on My MCPS. So I think they're still being somewhat flexible in terms of actual attendance taking. But your point about what happens if they have 75% attendance? What happened? I mean, what are you going to do? What are the, what possible, how are you going to hold students accountable? It's still, I mean, I don't think answered at all.
And I think more than are they physically there on screen, which is great if they are and if they're engaged, but how do we know that they're learning? That's more important than whether they're in front of the screen at a particular moment.
Yeah, I think on Facebook, Jamie Capella had a nice comment about how are we defining success this semester, right? Sort of like, this is not, and I think, we heard today a lot of, as you were saying, sort of, are we just trying to replicate the school building in our homes, both teachers' homes and kids' homes, right? Is that then what we do? And I think this is unprecedented, right? I've said this before. So I think we've got to evaluate it in a little different fashion than say this is business as usual and we're just shifting locations, because that's not realistic, that's not real, that's not what any of us are facing, right? You made a good point in terms of what it means just to transition a class from face-to-face to online. And all this is true, and this is what we're faced with. And there's some things that, I will give kudos to MCPS. I think understanding the level of digital divide and making sure that a lot of that was addressed, and some of the techniques. I think there's still some gaps with some of our teachers, as we've heard, and some of the things, but they're fixing that. And I think that's really good and really important, because that could have taken us down a whole nother path of challenge, right? Even before we get to any student interacting with a teacher. But I still think this mindset of, this is business as usual, I think we got to be honest with ourselves. This is not where any of us want it to be. You know, I think, what was that op-ed you wrote, Sunil? This is plan C? I don't know.
Yeah.
But this was not our plan A, right? This is not our plan B either, right? So given that, right, having a little bit of grace about what we're facing and what's possible, and put the resources that are really gonna do the things like get paras hired to make sure we're reaching out and contacting kids that aren't showing up, rather than, like, I care less about whether we're checking the box on attendance than us having a system where we're figuring out where these kids are and do they know how to get on and talking to their parents, right? Right. The bureaucratic thing is, let's just check the box, make sure the attendance box. But the real human thing is, you know, how are we engaging in a deeper way to make sure kids aren't just falling through the cracks?
Right. Go ahead.
No, I was just saying that's too much to just ask teachers on top of teaching. We need you to track down every student, and yeah, you got to take the lead because you have the relationship with those kids. But we need to put the supports in, and whether parents can help do that or not, that'll be complicated, I think. But then let's hire some parents to give support to do that, because it will exacerbate a bad situation if at the end of this semester, you know, we've just lost track of a huge number of kids. And that's not on you can't put that on any one teacher. You got to put that on the system. That's the system. That's all of our responsibilities as a county and as a school system. So shame on us if we don't put up front the resources in to make that possible, right?
Yeah, I think that's a big thing. So in Italy, for example, in reopening schools, they are hiring 80,000 more teachers. I mean, that's just unbelievable. And, you know, and Italy was hard hit. Everything was shut down. But in coming back, they're really, and I think this has been the formula for most of the reopening. So we compare our reopening to, you know, to European countries, but, you know, those countries are putting resources behind it, right? Dave and I have talked about the county rainy day fund, and it's pouring. So, right? I mean, if we're not going to use it now, when are we going to use it? And to be honest, you know, state has to provide resources. The federal government has to provide resources. And until we as a society can, you know, sort of demand it all together, it can't just be left to, you know, teachers and the school system to do, because we have to provide the school system with the resources to be able to do what we want it to do, right? Instead, you know, we say we are looking at budget cuts and expected to do more. So that's a very hard, ends to meet. I think in the end that really is our biggest weakness. But you know, I think the wonderful news of all this. So there's all bad. I mean, there's a lot of bad news. So, but I think the wonderful news is that the summer was better than spring. And I think there is a lot of talent in MCPS to make it right. And it'll take time, and we have to set the right expectations. I think in terms of leadership, I think that's been the problem, that there is a sense that, oh, this is unprecedented, but everything is going to go back to normal. Unprecedented, but it's going to be normal. That is kind of, you know, the problem that I think exists, and we have to do some expectation setting about, you know, what we want to do. Anyway, so thank you very much. I think it's almost 9:30, and I'm going to try and do this every week. So if you want to come right back or send some friends, please feel free. Anybody have some last things that we should take away with?
Yeah, just one thing, Sunil. Yeah. Since we've been on for like 6 hours now from the beginning of the board meeting, this is what a 6-hour day is like online. And I'm tired, man. I don't know if I could do this 5 days a week for several months. I think the point about, in all seriousness, the point about cutting back the hours or finding the right hours, whatever that is is going to be really crucial to whether this works or not, because it isn't just the kids, it's also teachers. You know, you have all this time to, you just said, we have so many hours that we have to plan. And Canvas, by the way, I used Canvas in the spring because I kind of figured this was coming.
Right.
There are a lot of pre-made module stuff. There's a lot of things that we can rely on to kind of get rolling right away, which is good. There's a lot of shared stuff, which is good. But we're still going to have way steep learning curve on how to do all this. And that's why I think what Ms. Dixon said was incredibly important, that we cannot be cutting any kind of time from teachers for planning. We just don't know how long it's going to take.
That's right. More planning time. I absolutely agree. All right, thank you very much. And hopefully we'll do this again.
Thank you.
Bye. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, guys.